That morning felt like any other. I was sitting on the couch, sipping coffee that had finally cooled enough to drink, while my husband quietly scrolled through emails beside me. The baby monitor hummed softly, the world outside still calm. It was one of those rare moments where it felt like life was finally coming together. We had just moved into a new home, something we worked so hard to achieve. We skipped vacations, cut back on dinners out, and spent countless evenings with spreadsheets open, budgeting every dollar so we could make this dream real. Then his phone rang. It was his mother. I could hear her voice through the phone, loud enough even when it wasn't on speaker. And I saw the way my husband's face changed as he listened. His brow creased, his eyes darted toward me, then back at the floor, then back at me again. Something was wrong. He ended the call without saying much, putting his phone down carefully like it was something fragile that might explode. "What was that about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed, that heavy, tired sigh I'd heard before when dealing with his mother. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice tight. I braced myself, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "She wants me to guarantee your brother-in-law's apartment lease." "What?" I blinked. "What lease?" "He wants to move to Seattle with his fiancée. The apartment is for $1,000 a month." $4,000. I felt my stomach drop. His brother-in-law, nearly 30, with no stable job, bad credit, and a history of borrowing money he never paid back, wanted to live in a luxury apartment he couldn't afford, and my mother-in-law wanted US to risk everything we had worked for so he could play house. I could feel my chest tighten, fear and anger mixing into a cold pit in my stomach. We had just bought our home. We were finally stable, finally building our future, and now she wanted us to throw it all away. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, so I just stared at him, shaking my head. "She can't be serious," I whispered. "She is," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. Outside, the world was still quiet, the day still unfolding. Inside, it felt like a storm had just begun. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of something we would have to fight to protect. I wish I could say I was surprised when my husband told me the next part, but the truth is, part of me saw it coming. After dropping the bomb that she wanted him to guarantee his brother-in-law's $1,000 rent, my mother-in-law said something that made my blood run cold. "Don't tell your wife." Those four words told me everything I needed to know about her intentions. She didn't want a conversation. She wanted control. She knew I would say no, that I would see through the excuses, that I would remind my husband of our priorities and our plans, of everything we had sacrificed to get here. She wanted to cut me out so she could guilt him, manipulate him, and push him into saying yes without the inconvenience of my voice in the background. I remember how my husband looked at me as he told me, his eyes tired, ashamed, conflicted. "I don't keep secrets from you," he said softly. I nodded, but inside, I felt something crack, because it wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about the way my mother-in-law had always tried to position herself as the center of his world, even after we were married, even after we built a life together. This wasn't the first time she had tried to put a wedge between us. I remembered how she would call him late at night for emergencies that turned out to be her loneliness. How she would make passive comments about how a mother's place can never be replaced. How she would say things like, "Don't tell your wife, she wouldn't understand." But this time, it wasn't a late-night phone call or a harmless secret. This was about our future, our credit, our home. And she wanted to jeopardize all of it behind my back. "What did you say to her?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked down, his thumb tracing the edge of the coffee table. "I told her I would talk to you first." That was something, at least. But I could see the guilt in his eyes, the fear of disappointing her, the weight of years of being made to feel responsible for his brother-in-law's failures and his mother's loneliness. I took a deep breath, feeling anger and sadness mix in my chest. "You did the right thing by telling me," I said, because I needed him to know that we were a team, that we were in this together. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning, because a woman who says, "Don't tell your wife," is a woman who will not give up easily, and we were going to have to be stronger than ever if we wanted to protect what we had built. It wasn't just the outrageous request that made me say no. It was who my brother-in-law was and who he had always been. Almost 30, yet living like a teenager who thought the world owed him comfort. No steady job, no sense of urgency, no shame in asking for help over and over. I remembered the first time he borrowed money from us. Just a small loan to cover a phone bill. He claimed was overdue because his boss hadn't paid him on time. We didn't think much of it then, handing him the cash with a promise that he would pay it back by the end of the month. Months turned into a year, and that money never came back. And that was just one of many stories. There was the time he borrowed gas money from my husband because he needed to drive to a job interview that, according to him, was a sure thing. The job never happened. The gas money was never returned. All the time, he moved into an apartment he couldn't afford, relying on their mother to pay rent when he fell behind, month after month. Each time, he promised it was the last, that he was getting on his feet, that this time would be different. It was never different. Every holiday, every family dinner, every phone call seemed to revolve around his latest crisis. His problems were always bigger than everyone else's, urgent enough that everyone was expected to drop what they were doing to rescue him. And the worst part? My mother-in-law allowed it. She didn't just allow it, she enabled it. She would complain endlessly about how lazy he was, how he never kept a job, how he spent money he didn't have. But the moment he called her with another story, she was there, checkbook in hand, ready to save him. She called it helping him. I called it what it was, enabling him to stay exactly where he was. And now he was repeating the cycle again, but this time on a larger scale. A $4,000 a month apartment in Seattle, no job and no plan, with the expectation that everyone around him would cushion his fall when, not if he failed. This wasn't just a pattern. It was a lifestyle he had chosen, because he had never been forced to face the consequences of his actions, and I refused to let his choices destroy the stability we had built in our home. We were not going to be his safety net. Not this time. Not ever again. Saying no to family is one of the hardest things you will ever have to do, especially when you know what's coming next. My husband and I sat at the kitchen table that night, the quiet hum of the fridge filling, the silence between us as we tried to process everything. I can't believe she asked that, I said, my voice low, careful, because I didn't want to sound like I was attacking his mother. I know, he replied, rubbing his temples. She thinks it's just what family does. But family doesn't mean letting someone else's recklessness jeopardize your stability. Family doesn't mean risking your future for someone who refuses to grow up. We talked about it for hours. We talked about the house we just bought, the bills we had to pay, the emergency fund we had built slowly, bit by bit, for moments when we needed it. We talked about the credit score we worked hard to maintain, and what would happen if his brother-in-law stopped paying rent and the landlord came for us. We talked about how it would feel to lose everything we had built because we were too afraid to say no. And we talked about the pattern, how his mother-in-law would guilt him, how she would call, text, cry, and say, "Your brother needs you," ignoring the fact that he was a grown man, capable of making his own choices and facing the consequences. "You know she's going to be upset," my husband said quietly, staring at his hands. "I know," I replied, "but we have to protect our family." It wasn't an easy decision, but it was a clear one. We decided together, as a team, that the answer was no. We would not guarantee the lease. We would not risk our future, our credit, our peace, for his brother-in-law's fantasy life. We would not clean up a mess we didn't create. We would not allow his mother to use guilt and obligation to force us into a decision that would harm us. We knew it wouldn't be the end of it. We knew there would be phone calls, texts, and family whispers painting us as the villains for refusing to help. But we were ready, because choosing each other, choosing our peace, and choosing our future was worth whatever storm was about to come. And deep down, I knew. Saying no wasn't cruel, it was necessary. The no didn't sit well with my mother-in-law. Not even for a day. The calls started almost immediately. At first, they were calm, just checking in. Her voice sweet to sweet, dripping with that tone she uses when she's about to ask for something she knows she shouldn't. "I just wanted to talk," she said. But it never really was just to talk. She started reminding my husband about all the things she had done for him. "Remember when I helped you with your first car? Remember how I was there when you needed help during college?" She sprinkled these reminders in like sugar. but they didn't taste sweet to me. Then came the guilt, greater than your brother needs you. Family always helps family. He's trying so hard, he just needs a little support. I could hear her voice through the phone when my husband would put her on speaker. Her sighs heavy, as if she was carrying the weight of the world. I'm getting older, you know. I won't always be around to help him. And in the same breath, she would complain about him. He's so irresponsible. I don't know what to do with him. He's never had to face real life, and it scares me. But when it came to actually letting him face the consequences of his choices, she froze because as much as she complained, she needed to be needed, and she wanted us to be part of that cycle. At night, I could see the toll it was taking on my husband. He would scroll through her texts, read her words over and over, his face pinched with stress, torn between protecting the life we built and the fear of disappointing his mother. We would lie in bed in silence, the glow of his phone the only light in the room. Do you think I'm a bad son? He asked me quietly one night, his voice barely above a whisper. No, I said, reaching for his hand. I think you're a good husband. Because that was the truth. Being a good son didn't mean sacrificing your marriage, your peace, or your family's future. Being a good husband meant protecting the home you promised to build, even when it meant saying no to the people you loved. But the calls didn't stop. The texts kept coming, and every day felt like a new battle to hold the boundary we had set. It wasn't easy, but as hard as it was, I knew letting her guilt us into saying yes would have been so much worse. Because enabling someone else's irresponsibility isn't kindness. It's just another way to keep a cycle going, no matter how much it costs everyone involved. And we weren't willing to pay that price. When it became clear that we weren't going to say yes, my mother-in-law did what she always does. She found another way to keep enabling him. Ignoring every warning, every concern, she decided to guarantee the lease herself. She told my husband proudly on the phone one evening, "Don't worry about it anymore. I'll take care of it. I can't let him give up on his future." As if this $1,000 a month apartment was some kind of noble stepping stone, instead of the financial disaster we both knew it would be. She even gave him $1,000 as a gift for the deposit. It's to help him get started, she explained, as if he was a teenager moving into a college dorm, not a grown man almost 30, who couldn't hold down a job for longer than a few months. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law was on cloud nine, posting Instagram stories of the apartment tour, the high-rise city view, and date nights with his fiancée in restaurants he couldn't afford. His captions were filled with phrases like, "New beginnings," "Chasing dreams," "Building our future." I wish I could say I was happy for him, but the truth, I felt a pit in my stomach every time I saw those posts. Because behind those curated pictures was a man who had no intention of facing reality, who was using his mother's savings to fund a lifestyle he hadn't earned. I watched him show off new furniture paid for by my mother-in-law, while she bragged to friends about how he's finally taking responsibility, ignoring that she was the one paying the bills. And the most frustrating part, she wanted everyone to clap for her, to praise her for being such a supportive mother, while the rest of us could see exactly where this was heading. My husband and I would talk about it in quiet voices at night. "She's going to drain herself," he said, shaking his head. "And he's going to let her," I replied. It wasn't just frustrating. It was heartbreaking. Because as much as I wanted to protect our family and distance ourselves from the chaos, it hurt to watch my mother-in-law sabotage her own future while convincing herself she was helping him. But we had made our decision. We weren't going to intervene. We weren't going to rescue them. We were going to let the consequences play out. Because sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to stand back and let people feel the weight of their choices, even when you see the train wreck coming. And that's exactly what we saw. A train wreck in slow motion. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. At first, my brother-in-law was living in a fantasy world, posting morning coffee shots on the balcony with the Seattle skyline in the background, captioning it, "Blessed, hustle mode, building my empire." But the only empire being built was one funded by my mother-in-law's savings, not by his hard work. He had no job lined up, only vague promises of "I'm waiting to hear back," or "I've got a few things in the works." His fiancée tried to believe in him, taking photos of their date nights, the new rug they bought, the tiny plants on the windowsill. But Instagram can't pay the rent. Every month, the $4,000 rent came due. And every month, he would scrape together a small part of it, then call my mother-in-law for the rest. "Mum, I just need a bit more time. It's just this month. Next month will be different." It never was. He spent his days playing video games, claiming it was stress relief, while his fiancée picked up extra shifts, coming home late, exhausted, only to find him sprawled on the couch. They started fighting. At first, it was whispered arguments behind closed doors. Then it became slammed doors and cold silences that lasted for days. The kind of tension you could feel through the screen whenever he posted a foot-smile selfie. My mother-in-law, who had boasted to everyone about helping him get started, began to sound tired on the phone with my husband. "He's trying so hard," she would say, but her voice would break a little. "I don't know what else to do," she confessed during one late-night call, her voice small, like she couldn't admit out loud that her enabling was failing. And I could see it in my husband's eyes when he got off those calls. The weight of watching his family fall apart. The guilt of knowing there was nothing he could do. And the relief that we had said no. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the truth no one wanted to say out loud. That my brother-in-law didn't want to grow up. That my mother-in-law didn't want to let him. And that both of them were sinking, holding on to each other while blaming everyone else for the water rising around them. We watched from the sidelines, our home quiet, our lives stable, our hearts heavy, because as much as we tried to protect ourselves, it was still painful to watch people you love unravel, especially when they refuse to see that they're holding the scissors. It all came crashing down faster than even I expected. His fiancée really tried to hold everything together, while my brother-in-law drifted through days of excuses and empty promises. She worked double shifts, came home with tired eyes, and found him still in pajamas, sitting on the couch, claiming he was job hunting on his phone while a video game loaded on the screen. "Next week, babe," he would say. "I'm just waiting on a call back. You just need to trust me," he insisted. "But you can't pay a $4,000 rent with trust." Their arguments grew louder, no longer whispers behind doors, but full-blown shouting matches neighbors could hear. She was tired of seeing her paycheck disappear into groceries, bills, and his lifestyle. And one day, she had enough. I don't know the exact moment she decided to leave, but I imagine her standing by the window, looking out at the city lights they couldn't afford, realizing she was living someone else's fantasy and paying for it. She packed her things quietly, her suitcase rolling across the apartment floor as he pleaded with her to stay. "Don't leave me. We can figure this out." But it was too late. She left the key on the counter, a note scribbled on a piece of paper, saying she couldn't do it anymore. That was the day the illusion of my brother-in-law's new life shattered. No more Instagram stories of couple breakfasts. No more balcony selfies. No more pretending everything was fine while someone else carried the weight. He called my mother-in-law, sobbing, claiming she abandoned him, blaming her for not helping enough, blaming the world for being unfair, blaming everyone except the one person responsible for it all, himself. And my mother-in-law. She cried too. "He's hurting so much," she told my husband over the phone, her voice trembling. "He just needs more time." But time wouldn't fix this, because the apartment wasn't getting paid for. The bills were piling up. And now she was the one responsible because she had guaranteed the lease. The dream she funded had turned into a nightmare. And my brother-in-law, stripped of the life he flaunted, was left alone in a high-rise he could no longer afford, with no one to cover for him. It was painful to watch from the sidelines, but it was also the reality they'd created for themselves, a reality built on avoidance, denial, and the belief that someone else would always come to the rescue. And this time, there was no one left to save him. I could tell by the way my mother-in-law's voice sounded on the phone that she was unraveling. At first, when she guaranteed the lease for my brother-in-law's luxury apartment, she said it with pride. "I'm just helping him get on his feet. He'll pay it back when he gets a job." But now, her calls to my husband were filled with long pauses, tight sighs, and that quiet panic people have when they realize they're in over their heads. Because the rent hadn't been paid in weeks. Because the utilities were overdue. Because the landlord wasn't calling her son anymore, they were calling her. And she was the one responsible for the thousands in unpaid rent. I remember overhearing one of their conversations while folding laundry. The hum of the dryer in the background as my husband held the phone to his ear. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He promised me he'd get a job. I thought I was helping him." And I could hear it, the fear she tried to hide for so long. The realization that her enabling wasn't helping him grow, it was dragging them both down. I learned later that she drained a large portion of her savings, the money she had put away for emergencies, for her retirement, to cover the months of unpaid rent, late fees, and the damages left in the apartment after my brother-in-law finally moved out. She tried to call it a loan, hoping he would pay her back one day, but we all knew he wouldn't. He never did. When the final payment was made, she didn't call to brag about how she helped her son like she used to. She just went quiet. And as for my brother-in-law, with his fiancée gone and the apartment no longer his, he packed what was left of his things and moved back into his mother's house, broke, angry, and blaming everyone else for how it ended. The tension between them was immediate. She was exhausted, financially drained, and emotionally bitter, while he acted like a victim, refusing to see how he caused his own downfall. They argued constantly. Small fights over groceries, chores, and money that turned into bigger fights, about how no one supported him, and how he ruined her life. And the sad part? They were stuck with each other. Two people who had spent years avoiding reality, now forced to live in it together, trapped in the cycle they had built. My mother-in-law paid the price for trying to save him from consequences, and my brother-in-law paid the price for refusing to grow up.